The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring spirit dancing. I was invited to present a lecture on shamanism at the Celebration Metaphysical Fair one year. I was a little skeptical, but my publicist at the time assured that it was the largest and oldest fair of its kind, and it would be a good thing to do, so I agreed. One thing led to another until our musical group was also performing throughout the weekend, and we ran a booth for my Shamanic Arts School. It turned out to be one of the most challenging weekends of my life. When we first arrived to set up the booth with the school texts and shamanic tools, there was no indication of what was to come. There was a crew of students helping, and together we set the booth up in no time. I went back to the hotel for dinner and a restful evening. Our musical group was to open the fair, so we showed up early the next day. Again, there was no apparent problems since the equipment had been set up the night before. We were halfway through the first set when it hit the fan. I'd just taken a deep breath preparing for a particular high note when I was blasted with a wave of dizziness that almost blew me off the stage. I managed to pull myself and the song together, but the waves of vertigo continued to worsen until it felt as though I was on a ship at high seas. I would have feared there was something seriously wrong with me, except when I looked over at my friend who was singing harmony. She was absolutely bilious. The cameraman wasn't looking any better, so apparently they were experiencing it too. After the set, I walked into the main showroom, and the problem became obvious to the trained eye. It was a huge venue, every wall lined with tables of psychic readers, all busy at work. In order to read others, it's necessary to transcend ordinary reality frequencies. Gateways were being opened at random with no regard to the ramifications. Frequencies and realities were flying around and crashing like waves, a sensitive's nightmare. When I arrived at our booth, one of my students was madly fanning sage around with a desperate look in her eye. "The sage isn't going to cut it," I informed her. "We have to create some really solid space around this booth if we have any hope of surviving the weekend." Through the use of tried and true shamanic ceremony and consistent maintenance of space, we did survive. Just. So what was going on? There are a lot of gifted people in the world, but very little provision for training in the use of one's gifts. If a person is going to be dancing in the spirit realm, they need to know how to maintain sacred space and manage frequency, or the bleed-through is nothing nice. When one randomly opens space between realms without sacred space, incompatible frequencies combine. In some traditions, this is seen as demonic or evil forces entering this realm. I simply view it as bandwidths that are out of place, but there you have it. Setting sacred space through ritual provides a closed system in which one can transcend frequencies or different divinations of the spirit realm without affecting the world at large. This protects not only the others in the vicinity, but the practitioner and client as well. Every shamanic tradition has a provision for setting space, and believe you me, it involves a lot more than waving sage around. That's why it's so important to learn and follow traditional protocol and frequency management, rather than simply adapting a little from this practice, a little from another, and participating in theatrics. The good news is this stuff really works. The bad news is this stuff really works, and if you're not well trained and mindful in the wielding of frequency, you can create one heck of a mess. Our guest this hour, Konstanza Morning Star, is the author of Medium, a step-by-step guide to communicating with the spirit worlds. She's an ordained minister, certified medium, and National Spiritualist Teacher. She's also a shamanic practitioner. Konstanza holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Newcomb College and a Master of Public Health degree from Tulane University. I will introduce Konstanza and explore her views on mediumship, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, psychopumping, or helping the dead to cross, and shamanism after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour, Konstanza Morning Star, the author of Medium, a step-by-step guide to communicating with spirit worlds. She can be found on her website, silverspringoflight.com. Konstanza, thank you for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Thank you for having me.
To start out with, I've got some questions around some of your bio things because I'm not familiar with some of it. You're an ordained minister. Which church were you ordained through?
I'm ordained through the National Spiritualist Association of Churches, and it's been in existence since the 1890s, and it's the oldest organization for spiritualism in the United States. And they have a number of churches all over the country, and in particular, I'm affiliated with the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment in Falls Church, Virginia.
Oh, nice. So that's how you became a natural spiritualist teacher, is that correct?
That's correct. And it did involve years of training and study and a lot of practice and formal examinations as well. So it was a very long process, and it took me, I think altogether it took me probably about 5 years from when I started to study until I was ordained. So it's not something that you just do overnight and in a snap. It just takes time.
I'm so glad to hear that, because I know people can become ordained by sending $5 in over the internet, and so many people do that and then call themselves ordained. It's like, really? Come on. So how does one become a certified medium?
Again, this too is through the National Spiritualist Association of Churches, and what it involves is it involves a lot of study. It means you take the Morris Pratt educational course on modern spiritualism. That's the educational part of becoming a medium. But then you also have to take other classes, and you have to sit in development circles so that your gift of mediumship develops. And once it's developed and you are deemed ready for public demonstrations, then you have to give regular mediumship demonstrations in front of various congregations. And that means that you connect with the people, with the congregants' spirit loved ones. You have to bring them through, and you have to bring a lot of information called evidence so that the sitters can recognize their own spirit loved ones. And then if they feel that you've given enough good evidence and that they feel that they really recognize the spirit person, they might feel inclined to write what's called an affidavit, where they fill out the information that you brought through and whether they feel that you really connected with their spirit people. And you have to, I think I had 12 of those affidavits that I submitted to take my certified medium's exam. So not every time when you give messages do people feel inclined to fill out an affidavit. And I think you can give a lot of evidential messages, but if people don't have the time or they don't feel inclined or they don't want to fill out a document associated with an organization, then they'll just say, well, thank you, this was lovely, but I'm not comfortable filling out any paperwork.
Well, that sounds very extensive. And then
yes,
my last question along these lines is, where did you get your training as a shamanic practitioner?
Through the Foundation for Shamanic Studies.
Ah, Michael Harner's group, yes.
Yep, Michael Harner's group, and it's really interesting how all of that came about, because I started taking the mediumship classes, and I started to attend a spiritualist church in 2004, 2005. And several years later, I believe in 2007 or 2008, I can't remember, in my meditations, I started to have spontaneous contact with a spirit animal. And then later that animal showed itself to me in ordinary reality on one of my hikes in Shenandoah National Park. And when I shared that with a friend of mine who actually was very well versed in shamanism, he suggested that I might be interested in attending a drum circle. So he introduced me to the Shamanic Drum Circle also in Virginia, affiliated with Michael Harner's group. And I started to attend, and after a while I thought, okay, it's time to really take formal classes. This is indeed calling me. And of course I found that as medium, if you can communicate with the spirit people, you can definitely communicate with power animals and with the helpers of the shamanic realms.
Well, it sounds like a marriage made in heaven, if you will, the being able to be a medium as well as have the checks and balances of the shamanic way. Would you mind telling us the difference between a shaman and a shamanic practitioner?
Well, my understanding, and I call myself a shamanic practitioner, the difference is shamans usually are people from traditional societies who are recognized in their societies as shamans. And I feel that here in the Western world, we have largely lost those traditions, and the Foundation for Shamanic Studies has very much helped us in reintroducing these traditions and training people and reconnecting us with those traditions. However, I would feel that it would be presumptuous of me to call myself a shaman. I feel more comfortable saying that I'm a shamanic practitioner simply because I use shamanic methods in my healing work with clients. It's
very well put. I have to say I'm of the same mind. I couldn't agree with you more. And so how do you employ shamanism in your mediumship practice?
Well, actually, they are two different things. My work as medium consists largely of either teaching mediumship development or giving private readings to clients who come to me. And in those private readings, I open with prayer, and then I connect with the people's spirit loved ones, bringing through a lot of evidence, as well as sharing whatever messages of guidance those loved ones have for them. Now, in my shamanic practice, that is a healing practice, and it largely consists of soul retrieval. It also consists of spirit release, because on occasion, I do have people who feel that they might have a spirit attachment, or they're concerned about spirit activity in their homes. And in that case, I would use shamanic techniques basically to clear the property of those visiting spirit people or undesired spirit people.
Do you feel that we are in a position to make that discernment, that they do or don't belong there, or how do you figure that out?
Well, to me, it usually is a matter of a shamanic journey where I would travel to my spirit helpers and I would ask them, I would say, okay, what's going on here? What's going on at this address? Is there a problem, or what's the nature of it? And if there are spirit people who have been causing problems for the clients, then usually what the spirit helpers would do is they would bring in the loved ones and the spirit helpers of that entity. And together we would convince the spirit person that they are no longer in a physical body, they have died, and it's time for them to be reunited with their loved ones on the other side. I've never seen a spirit person that, when they were reconnected with their own spirit loved ones, who wasn't ready to go. So it's not a matter of me making the decision. It really is a collaboration with the spirit helpers, and I do feel they very much work with the soul who is affected by this. So in other words, I don't think that anybody is forcibly removed. It's very much a matter of making them realize where they are and that they could indeed be in a better place.
Very beautiful. So what you're speaking of there is psychopomp work, or helping the dead to cross. Did you have some formal training in that?
Again, it's something, well, my training in psychopomp work, it very much came to me actually through my work as medium. And what happened is that on occasion I would be in a development circle, for example, and I would become aware that there would be a person who needed help. And once it was a friend of mine who had just died a few weeks earlier. He came to me because he was very, very upset because there were changes that were made in his home, and he was very much against those changes. And he was also upset with his children because his children weren't listening to him. They ignored him. And it just very quickly became clear to me that he had died, and he didn't realize that he had died because his passing was very sudden and rather unexpected at that time. So I just ended up talking with him, and I explained to him what happened to him. It took about 30 minutes, but then he went off to convince himself of the reality of what I had shared with him, and he came back months later to thank me for the help that I had given him. And then, of course, there were other people who would come to me over time. So I feel that this is really something that was brought to me from the spirit world, and I very much feel the spirits and my spirit helpers, they were the ones that trained me in this.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've found a lot of my training, particularly I've been at 40 years here, but a lot of my training anymore really does come from the other side. The teachers that I've had here, we kind of ceilinged out together, and but my training does continue. And that's such a beautiful provision to know that there are spirits out there willing to help you as long as you're intending to service other people or to serve other people. What do you mean by facilitating healing on both sides of life?
Well, it basically, facilitating healing on both sides of life. When you give as medium, when I give a reading and the spirit loved ones come through for a client, it is something that is very healing for my client here in the physical, because they realize that their loved ones are still alive and well on the other side. I do make sure that I bring a lot of evidential information so that there really isn't a shadow of a doubt that I'm really connecting and really communicating with their loved ones. So it's healing for them because they know that their loved one is still alive and well, and it also helps them know that life is not the end and that they themselves don't have to be afraid of death.
Beautiful. And, we're going to have to take another short break. We'll return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Do you want to hear more? Previous broadcasts of any episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. Visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our special guest this hour is Konstanza Morning Star, the author of Medium, a step-by-step guide to communicating with the spirit worlds. She can be found on her website, www.silverspringoflight.com. Konstanza, we were talking about psychopumping and all that fun stuff, and I have a question for you. Have you ever experienced or heard of where someone is trying to help the dead to cross and the dead decides to hop on them and not go to the other side?
I can imagine that could happen. I don't have experience with that. I know that is something that has never happened to me, but I feel if you're not well trained, and if you're not well grounded, and if you're not well connected or well merged, as shamans would say, if you're not well merged with your power animals, I can see that you could wind up, quote unquote, picking up an errant spirit. So again, it's something that you have to do with preparation and with intention and with deliberation. I feel if you work in that way, then you are protected, but I think if you're sloppy or tired or cutting corners or distracted, I think that is when you put yourself at risk.
Absolutely. And, in keeping with the teaching at the beginning, how do you set up space in order to assure that we aren't getting sloppy and that we are protecting those around us?
Well, I do keep a very clear physical space. I keep my place physically clean because I do feel that clutter and dirt and things like that, they do tend to attract undesirables, both in terms of cockroaches in the kitchen and perhaps spirits who aren't of the highest and of the best. And I also it's also very much a preparation within myself. I do make sure that I make time for prayer, for meditation, that I spend time consulting with my helping spirits, and that I live my life in a way that's set up to basically help people. So it's very much a matter of cultivating a positive attitude and a positive frame of mind within myself, where I'm forgiving with people, where I give others the benefit of the doubt, and where I basically try to be a positive person of service to others. So I feel that if these are the qualities that you build and cultivate within yourself, then you're in a good position to do the kind of work that I'm doing. And I feel that it does give you a lot of protection in that it attracts spirit helpers who want to work with you, and they do want to make sure that you come to no harm. simply because you wind up helping a lot of people.
The key sounds like is living the life of sacred space rather than just performing it when you're getting ready to work. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. It is very much about living the life of sacred space within and all around you. And sometimes people want to take shortcuts and they think that, they can take a class or a workshop and they're ready to go, but it really is a little bit more complicated than that. I find it is very much about living the life.
I agree. It's totally lifestyle. And if we're living our life in an imbalanced way, how can we hope to hold balanced space to do our work or to work for others?
That's correct. I would say if we're in an imbalanced place, then it's important to realize that there is an imbalance and to try to do what we can to bring our life back on track. So, for example, if I would be in a place where I'm really compromised, perhaps because I'm going through a period of heartbreak or setbacks in my life, what it would mean for me is that I would take a break from doing my work. And I would just say, okay, I need a few weeks of a time out. I need to just get myself back in balance. So I'm not going to make myself available as a medium or as shamanic practitioner in that time.
That's a beautiful way of taking responsibility. Constanza, the one thing that I found as a practitioner is that the practice itself demands constant surveillance and constant processing in my personal world, in my personal life, in order to be present and ready to be the caliber I need to be the frequency master I need to be to service my other people. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Very much so. Very much so. And my teachers would also say that after we've worked with the spirit world, it's also important to really close that connection off again afterwards, just so that we can then go on and live our life just as a person, not as a medium, because it is important to have balance, like we said a minute ago, and that involves being able to get together with friends and family or go to a movie without necessarily being open to the spirit world all the time.
That's a really good point, because not only is the spirit world distracting to us, but us carrying that frequency around in ordinary reality and day-to-day life can be challenging for those around us. And I personally find I have to be very mindful of that. So what are the séances? You say you do séances. Would you explain what that is and how you perform them?
Well, for me, a séance is simply a group reading. And I think people can have various understandings of it, but the way I use the term séance is it simply is a group reading. And it's just where you get together, where I would get together with a group of people, possibly a family or a group of friends, and I would connect with the spirit people of the people who would come to this event.
So you also teach mediumship and psychic development. Does a person need to have a particular gift, or can anyone learn to do this?
I feel because we all are spirit and we all come from spirit and we all go back to spirit, and we're just temporarily housed in this physical body, if you will, I do feel that we all have the ability to connect with the spirit world. I do think it's a skill. It's very much like reading and writing, playing an instrument, or being able to draw or paint, or creating beautiful things out of wood. I think it's a skill, it's a gift that can be learned. But like all of these skills, it does require patience and it does require dedication. And it's important to remember that when we learned how to walk, and walking is natural for humans, we weren't born walking. It took us a while to learn how to walk, and then it took us a while before we were able to perfect it so that we were able to play, I don't know, soccer, football, ballet, or whatever sport we might have gotten into.
So we've been talking about spirit world. Would you mind defining what you mean by spirit world?
Well, I would define spirit world as the place where we go after we die. Commonly, it's also known as heaven. So it's basically the life, the dimension, the life after the one after we leave our physical body.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty expansive, isn't it? If you consider all the different practices, like the Tibetans believe in the bardo, Catholics probably call it purgatory. There's all sorts of different frequency levels between us and heaven. But you're talking about all
You're
of them,
right.
is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and you are absolutely right. There can be different layers. There are different strata in the spirit world. Spiritualist forerunner Andrew Jackson Davis in the 19th century talked about the fact that there are various layers. He perceived 7 different ones, and the lower levels of the spirit world, they would be what you would consider the lower realms of the astral world, the areas closest to Earth where the energy is densest, and that tends to be the place where where spirits would be who might not have realized that they have died, and they can get stuck in that area. And of course, then there are the higher realms, and basically where you wind up is based on the type of person that you've been in life. If basically you were a kind person who tried to help other people and who didn't exactly go out to harm others, then you would wind up in a different place of the spirit world than perhaps people who were mass murderers, or maybe the Hitlers or the Saddam Husseins of this life. So in other words, we would wind up in different areas, but not because anyone condemns us to those areas, but because that is where our mindset is. In other words, we would wind up with people, surrounded by people who would have the same mindset and attitudes as we have.
Got it. Well, we're going to have to take another break. We'll be back on the flip side of this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. You can always listen to previous broadcasts on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bridging together gifted people of service to the world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our special guest this hour is Konstanza Morning Star, the author of Medium, a step-by-step guide to communicating with the spirit worlds. Visit her website, www.silverspringoflight.com. Welcome back, Konstanza. And let's just start out with you telling us where people can find your books.
Right now, the book will be released on August 8th by Llewellyn Worldwide, and it will be available through the Llewellyn website, through Amazon.com, Barnes and Nobles, and all the places where you'd normally buy books.
Great. And here's another question for you. I would like you to tell us, what are the big 6 spiritual senses, and how do you define them?
Okay, well, first of all, there is clairvoyance, and that is the ability to perceive the visual impressions from the spirit world. That's the one sense that everybody always wants to have. Everybody wants to see the spirit people. And then there is also clairaudience. That's the ability to hear the sounds and voices from the spirit side of life. Then there is clairsentience, and clairsentience is the ability to feel the physical conditions as well as the emotional makeup of the spirit people. And it also involves the ability to smell and taste the foods and to smell the scents from the spirit side of life. And the ability to smell is called actually clear olfaction, and clear gustation is the sense of being able to taste the foods from the spirit side of life. And finally, we also have what's known as claircognizance. And claircognizance is when suddenly you know something and you know it so thoroughly you just know it. It's just a knowing where you don't know where it comes from, and it can be complex concepts that you suddenly know and understand, or it can be insight and knowledge about a situation that is unfolding. So, but it's clear. It's basically the knowledge of things without input from the mundane world. So it's not something that's based on inference. It's just something that just very suddenly comes to you out of the blue.
You know, as you're speaking, I realize that I work within all of these. But what I've noticed about them is it's almost seamless for me in that I'll smell something and I'll think it's something in my clear environment, but as I get to looking around, I realize, no, actually, that is somebody's aftershave, and there's nobody here wearing aftershave, so who's in my space? Is this what you're talking about with clairsentience?
Exactly.
It's just fascinating, and it does seem so
when you're with
seamless.
people, for example,
Also,
if you
the
get
writings I
together with
do or
friends
anything
and
tend to come
you're
to me in the
feeling
middle of the
great, you're
night,
feeling
and I
fine.
have an entire writing kind of delivered to me in my sleep, and I just jot down a few words, and then it comes back. So that's also another one of these things that you're talking about, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and we all have access to this. How do you suggest we develop it more fully?
The best way to develop this is basically to get away from the noise of the mundane world and to turn off the TV and internet and get away from our tablets and iPhones and basically spend time in silence, in meditation. So meditation is really something that helps because it just helps clear the static and the turbulence and the interference from around us, and it is something that just opens us up to the higher frequency, if you will, of the spirit world and of the spirits around us. So I find that it's absolutely indispensable to spend time in meditation every day. And all the mediums that I know, they meditate several times a day. It just comes with the territory, and it does help open up and then sharpen our gifts and our abilities.
What do you see as the difference between the journey trance and meditation?
You mean between shamanic journeying and meditation?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, there is a difference. And with meditation, we basically sit down and we close our eyes and we calm ourselves. And we're not necessarily trying to pursue contact with anybody in the spirit world. We just sit quietly and we're going within. Shamanic journeying, on the other hand, is something that is always done with a purpose. In other words, we go to the upper world or lower world to consult with the spirit helper about X, Y, and Z, or to accomplish a certain goal. So we journey with purpose, but meditation is basically just for the purpose of just being quiet and going within and just cultivating that inner silence.
So they each have different purposes depending on what you're trying to accomplish, huh?
Very much so, yes.
You mentioned what you call lower astral plane entities. What are they?
Basically, they're spirit people who are stuck, who probably don't realize that they have died, or who perhaps are afraid to move on in the spirit world, because sometimes people grew up with a belief in hellfire and eternal damnation, and they can be very afraid when they die and they realize, wow, they didn't live a good life, and perhaps they were thieves, or maybe they harmed others, or they cheated on their spouses. They might think, oh my God, I'm going to go to a hot place called hell. Well, I don't want that. I'm just going to hang out over here where maybe I can just avoid this kind of punishment. And in that case, that would be a spirit person who would need to be convinced that there is no such thing as hell, and that indeed that they're stuck, and that it is safe to move on, and to basically make them realize that when they move on, they're going to be met with spirit people and with helpers who have a lot of love and who have a lot of compassion for them, and who are willing to help them get whatever healing they need so that they can better themselves and evolve in the spirit world.
What advice do you have for our listeners interested in learning mediumship?
I would suggest that they start meditating, and I would suggest, and I know this sounds like I'm trying to promote myself, but I would recommend that they would purchase my book that's going to be released, the book Mediums, a step-by-step guide to communicating with the spirit world, simply because it is very beginner-friendly. I don't assume that anyone knows anything about it, so there are a lot of explanations, and everything is broken down into steps, and there are also a lot of different exercises in there that would help people. And I would definitely recommend that they start a daily meditation practice where they just go within. And I also feel that prayer is important as well. So if they feel drawn to pray for other people who might be going through difficulty, or praying for areas that experience strife and hardship in the world, that too is a good way to open up the awareness to a greater sense of wanting to be of service. And again, it's something that would make a person attractive to the compassionate, helping spirits who would want to work with them and to help them develop the gift of mediumship.
That's very well stated. It's like there's no substitute for self-awareness, self-control, and self-healing, because the more we do of it, the higher our frequency, and the higher frequency beings we draw to ourselves. Constanza, it's been an absolute joy having you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you for everything you're bringing the world, and hopefully we get together again sometime. This has been the Science of Magic.
Thank you for inviting me.
Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, as you dance in the land of spirit.